Mr. Whisperer.
It was early January 2023, and I was driving for Uber in a small town nestled in the Pacific Northwest, where dense forests and winding roads made every night shift feel like a journey into the unknown. I'd been at it for about 6 months. Picking up extra cash after my day job as a mechanic didn't cover the bills. Night shifts were my preference. The quiet suited me, and the occasional drunk passenger or chatty tourist was easy enough to handle. But one foggy night, just past midnight, I picked up a rider who turned my world upside down, and I haven't been the same since. The app pinged with a new request as I idled in a grocery store parking lot, sipping coffee to stay awake. The pickup was at an old bus stop about 10 minutes away, on a rural road that cut through a stretch of woods. The rider's name was listed as Elias. No profile picture, just the name in plain text. The destination was a house 25 minutes out, deeper into the countryside, an area I rarely drove through. I accepted the ride, figuring it was just another quiet fare, maybe a late-night worker heading home. The fog was thick that night, rolling in from the nearby river, so I drove slowly, my headlights barely piercing the haze. When I reached the bus stop, it was little more than a rusted bench under a flickering streetlight, surrounded by towering pines that disappeared into the mist. A man stood there, perfectly still, wearing a dark overcoat and a wide-brimmed hat tilted low over his face. He didn't wave or move as I pulled up, just stood like he'd been waiting for hours. I rolled down the window, the damp air seeping into the car, and called out, "Elias?" He nodded slowly, his face hidden in shadow, and opened the back door, sliding into the seat directly behind me. The door closed with a heavy thud, and the car felt instantly smaller, like the air had thickened. I confirmed the destination in the app, a single-story house on a dead-end road, no neighbors. For miles. That where we're going? I asked, trying to sound friendly. He didn't answer at first, just sat there, his hands resting on his knees. After a long pause, he said, "Yes, keep going." His voice was deep, almost too smooth, with a faint accent I couldn't place, old-fashioned, like he was from another time. I started driving, the fog swallowing the road ahead, my wipers smearing the windshield with every pass. The silence in the car was heavy, broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of his coat as he shifted slightly. I glanced in the rearview mirror, but his hat obscured his face, leaving only the faint outline of his jaw. His stillness unnerved me. He didn't check his phone, didn't look out the window, just stared straight ahead, like he was watching something I couldn't see. I tried to shake off the unease by asking, "You from around here?" He didn't respond, but I felt his gaze shift, like a weight pressing against the back of my head. "Not exactly," he said finally, his voice low and deliberate. "But I know these roads." The fog grew thicker as we left the main road, turning onto a narrow lane flanked by dark trees. The GPS signal flickered, the app warning me of a weak connection. I kept driving, but the unease was building, a knot tightening in my chest. About 10 minutes in, I noticed something odd. The temperature in the car was dropping. My breath fogged in the air, and the dashboard heater was blowing cold, even though it was set to high. I tapped the vent, muttering, "Come on, don't crap out on me now." Elias spoke again, unprompted. "It's not the car," he said. "It's the road." I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking, but when I glanced in the mirror, his head was tilted slightly, like he was studying me. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shakier than I intended. He didn't answer, just leaned forward, his coat brushing against the seat. "Keep your eyes ahead," he said, his tone sharp, almost commanding. I obeyed, my hands gripping the wheel tighter. The fog was so dense now that I could barely see 10 feet in front of the car, the headlights reflecting back like I was driving into a wall. The GPS chimed, telling me to turn left, but there was no road, just a dirt path barely wide enough for the car. "This can't be right," I said, slowing down. Elias's voice came again, closer now, like he was leaning toward me. "It's right. Trust me." Asterisk against my better judgment. I turned onto the path, the tires crunching over gravel and fallen branches. The trees closed in, their gnarled branches scraping the sides of the car like fingers. The GPS went silent, the screen frozen on a blank map. I checked my phone. No signal, No bars, just a dead connection. Panic crept in, but I kept driving, telling myself we were almost there. The house had to be close. That's when I heard it, a faint whisper, like someone murmuring just out of earshot. It was coming from the back seat, but Elias's lips weren't moving. I froze, my eyes darting to the mirror. "Did you say something?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer, but the whispering continued, soft and rhythmic, like a chant in a language I didn't understand. The path ended at a clearing, and the house came into view, a dilapidated structure, its windows dark and boarded, the roof caving in. No lights, no cars, no signs of life. The fog curled around it like a living thing, clinging to the walls. I stopped the car, my heart pounding. "We're here," I said, trying to sound calm. Elias didn't move. I turned to look at him, and for the first time, I saw his face clearly. His eyes were pale, almost white, and his skin was too smooth, like wax. His lips curled into a faint smile, not warm but predatory. "Not yet," he said. He opened the door and stepped out, the fog swallowing him instantly. The door stayed open, the cold air pouring in. I sat there, paralyzed, the engine idling. The ride was still active in the app, but the destination pin had vanished, replaced by a spinning loading icon. My instincts screamed to leave, but I couldn't move, like something was holding me in place. The whispering started again, louder now, coming from outside the car, circling me. I scanned the fog, expecting to see him, but there was nothing, just shapes in the mist, shifting and twisting. Then I saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the clearing, too tall, too thin, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It wasn't Elias. It wasn't human. I snapped out of it, slamming the car into reverse. The tires spun, kicking up mud, as I backed down the path. The figure didn't move, but I felt its gaze, heavy and unrelenting. As I reached the main road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Elias was sitting in the back seat again, his pale eyes locked on mine. I screamed, swerving, but when I looked again, the seat was empty. The door was still open, swinging slightly as I sped away. I drove to a gas station, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel. The app showed no record of the ride, no Elias, no destination, nothing. I called Uber support, but they said the trip didn't exist, blaming a system glitch. I checked my car the next day, expecting to find something, anything, to prove it happened. Under the back seat was a single black feather, long and glossy, like nothing I'd ever seen. I burned it, but the smell lingered for days. I quit Uber that week. I don't drive at night anymore, and I avoid that road at all costs. But sometimes, when the fog rolls in, I hear that whispering again, faint and distant, like it's calling me back. I don't know who or what Elias was, but I'm terrified he's still out there, waiting for another driver to take him down that path. It was March 2023, and I was driving for Uber in a sprawling suburb outside Seattle. I'd been at it for about a year, picking up night shifts to cover my rent after a rough patch left me scrambling for cash. The job was routine, drunk bar-goers, tired shift workers, the occasional oddball who'd ramble about their life story. I didn't mind the late hours. The streets were calm, and the darkness had a way of making everything feel like it was moving through a different world. But one rainy night, just after 2 a.m., I picked up a rider who made me question reality itself, and I haven't driven for Uber since. The app pinged with a new request while I was parked at a 24-hour coffee shop, scrolling through my phone to stay awake. The pickup was at a community park about 12 minutes away, a quiet place with soccer fields and a walking trail that backed onto a cemetery. The rider's name was Clara. No profile picture, just the name in plain text. The destination was an apartment complex 22 minutes out, in a part of town I'd driven through a few times. Cookie-cutter buildings, not much to note. I accepted the ride, figuring it was a quick fare before calling it a night. The rain was steady, pattering on my windshield, and the streetlights cast a hazy glow through the mist that I pulled into the park's empty lot, my headlights sweeping across wet grass and a lone picnic shelter. A woman stood under the shelter, her figure barely visible in the dim light. She wore a long, dark raincoat with the hood up, her hands clasped in front of her. She didn't move as I approached, just stood there, like she was carved from the shadows. I rolled down the window. the damp air chilling my face, and called out, "Clara?" She lifted her head slightly, her face hidden under the hood, and nodded. Without a word, she walked over, her steps slow and deliberate, and got into the back seat behind the passenger side. The door closed softly, but the sound echoed in my ears that I checked the app, confirming the apartment address. "That where we're headed?" I asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. She didn't respond, just sat with her hands in her lap, her hood still up. I caught a glimpse of her chin, pale, almost translucent in the faint light, but her eyes were hidden. The silence felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me, so I started driving, the wipers slapping rhythmically against the rain. The park faded behind us, and the road stretched out, dark and slick, flanked by rows of evergreens that loomed like sentinels. Clara didn't speak, didn't move, didn't even shift in her seat. I'm used to quiet passengers, but this was different. Her stillness was unnatural, like she wasn't breathing. I glanced in the mirror again, and her head was tilted slightly, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. The air in the car grew colder, my breath visible despite the heater blasting. I fiddled with the controls, muttering, "Sorry, this thing's acting up." She didn't react, but I felt her presence intensify, like a weight settling over my shoulders. About 10 minutes in, I tried to break the tension. "You work late or something?" I asked, forcing a casual tone. She didn't answer at first, but then her voice came, soft and hollow, like it was echoing from somewhere far away. "I'm going home," she said. The words were simple, but they sent a shiver down my spine. There was something wrong with her voice, too flat, too empty, like it didn't belong to a living person. I nodded, keeping my eyes on the road. "Cool, almost there," I said, though the GPS still showed 15 minutes to go. The rain picked up, hammering the roof, and the road narrowed as we entered a residential area. The houses were dark, their windows like empty eyes. I noticed something odd. The app's map was glitching, the route line jittering across the screen like it couldn't decide where to go. I tapped it, but it didn't fix. "Damn technology," I said, half to myself. Clara spoke again, her voice closer now, like she'd leaned forward. "It's not the machine," she said. "It's the place." I froze, my hands tightening. "On the wheel." "What do you mean?" I asked, but she didn't answer, just settled back into her seat, her hood casting her face in shadow. The cold in the car was unbearable now, my fingers numb on the steering wheel. I checked the dashboard, 68 degrees Fahrenheit, but it felt like a freezer. The cemetery we'd passed earlier came to mind, its headstones barely visible through the rain. I pushed the thought away, focusing on the road, but then I heard it, a faint scratching, like nails on fabric, coming from the back seat. I glanced in the mirror, and Clara's hands were still in her lap, unmoving. The scratching stopped, then started again, louder, like it was coming from inside the seat itself. My heart pounded, but I didn't dare ask what it was. That we reached the apartment complex, a cluster of low-rise buildings surrounded by a chain-link fence. The lot was empty, the streetlights flickering, casting long shadows across the pavement. I pulled up to the main entrance, the GPS finally settling on the address. "Here we are," I said, my voice shaking. Clara didn't move. I turned to look at her, and my breath caught. Her hood had slipped slightly, revealing her face, pale, gaunt, with dark hollows where her eyes should have been. Her lips parted, and she whispered, "Not here." Further, I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. "What?" "This is the address in the app." She pointed out the window, toward a dark alley between two buildings. "There," she said. That I hesitated, every instinct screaming to end the ride and get out. "I can't go off the app's route," I said, trying to sound firm. She didn't respond, just kept pointing, her finger trembling slightly. Against my better judgment, I drove toward the alley, the rain blurring the windshield. The alley was narrow, barely wide enough for the car, and it led to a dead end, a brick wall covered in graffiti. I stopped, my hands trembling. "This is it," I said, turning to her. She was gone. The back seat was empty, the door still closed, the seatbelt unbuckled. My heart stopped. I checked the app. The ride was still active, the destination now blank. Panic set in. I threw the car into reverse, the tires screeching as I backed out of the alley. That's when I saw her, standing at the end of the alley, her raincoat billowing in the wind, her face fully visible now. Her eyes were black voids, and her mouth was stretched into an unnatural grin. I floored it, the car lurching onto the main road, the rain swallowing her figure behind me. The scratching started again, louder, coming from the trunk now. I didn't stop, didn't look, just drove to a gas station 10 minutes away, my pulse racing to the gas station. I checked the app. No record of Clara, no trip history, nothing. I called Uber support, my voice shaking, but they said the ride didn't exist, citing a server error. I checked the back seat. Empty, but the air still felt cold, heavy. I opened the trunk, half expecting something horrific, but it was just my spare tire and a toolbox. Tucked into the corner, though, was a small, damp photograph, curling at the edges. It showed a woman in a raincoat, standing in a park, her face blurred but unmistakably Clara's. On the back, in smudged ink, was an address, the same apartment complex I'd just left out. I drove to the complex the next day, in daylight, needing answers. The manager said no one named Clara lived there, and the apartment tied to the address had been vacant for months after a tenant died. A woman, found in her car during a rainstorm, cause unknown. I didn't tell him about the photo. I threw it into a dumpster, but I still see her face in my dreams, those black eyes staring through me. I quit Uber that day. I don't drive at night anymore, and I avoid that park like the plague. But sometimes, when it rains, I hear that scratching. Faint but unmistakable, like she's still with me, waiting to go further. It was late April 2023, and I was driving for Uber in a quiet town in upstate New York. I'd been doing the gig for about 8 months, a side hustle to supplement my job as a bartender. Night shifts were my thing. Less traffic, better tips, and a strange kind of solitude that I found comforting. The town was small, surrounded by rolling hills and dense forests, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and nothing much happened after midnight. But one rainy spring night, around 1:30 a.m., I picked up a passenger who changed how I saw the world, and I've never felt safe in my car since. The app pinged while I was parked outside a closed diner, sipping lukewarm coffee and debating whether to call it a night. The pickup was at a gas station 7 minutes away, one of those rundown spots on the edge of town with flickering lights and a single pump. The rider's name was Paul. No profile picture, just the name in stark letters. The destination was a house 28 minutes out, in a rural area where the roads twisted through woods and past old farms. I accepted the ride, figuring it was a quick fare to end the shift. The rain was light but steady, cloaking the streets in a misty haze, and my wipers squeaked with every pass that I pulled into the gas station lot, the neon sign buzzing faintly overhead. A man stood near the pump, alone, wearing a dark jacket with the collar turned up and a baseball cap pulled low. He didn't look up as I approached, just stood there, hands in his pockets, like he was waiting for something inevitable. I rolled down the window, the damp air seeping in, and called out, "Paul." He nodded without lifting his head and walked over, his boots splashing in shallow puddles. He opened the back door and slid into the seat directly behind me. Door closing with a soft click that felt louder than it should. I confirmed the destination in the app, a house on a dead-end road, far from any neighbors. "That where we're going?" I asked, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. His face was shadowed by the cap, but I caught the glint of his eyes, sharp and unblinking. "Yeah," he said, his voice low and gravelly, like he hadn't spoken in days. I started driving, the rain picking up, drumming on the roof. The silence in the car was thick, almost tangible, and Paul didn't move, didn't check his phone or adjust his jacket. Just sat there, staring at the back of my seat. Road wound out of town, streetlights giving way to darkness, the trees closing in on either side. I tried to ease the tension with small talk. "Long night?" I asked, keeping my tone light. He didn't answer right away, but then he said, "You ever feel like you're not alone, even when you are?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. I forced a laugh. "Guess I get that, driving these empty roads." He didn't respond, but I felt his gaze shift, like a physical weight pressing against me. In the mirror, his eyes were locked on mine, and they didn't waver. About 10 minutes in, the air in the car turned cold, unnaturally so. My breath fogged, and the heater, cranked to max, did nothing to warm me. I checked the dashboard, 70 degrees Fahrenheit outside, but the car felt like a refrigerator. I tapped the vent, muttering, "This thing's acting up." Paul spoke again, his voice closer, like he'd leaned forward. "It's not the car," he said. "It's the road you're on." My stomach twisted. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, glancing back. His cap was tilted up now, revealing a pale face, his eyes too large, too dark, like they were swallowing the light that I kept driving, my hands tied on the wheel. The GPS started glitching, the route line jumping across the screen, then vanishing entirely. The app showed we were still 20 minutes from the destination, no matter how long I drove. The rain was heavier now, the wipers struggling to keep up. I tried to focus, but then I heard it, a low, rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming on the seat. I looked in the mirror. Paul's hands were still in his lap, unmoving. The tapping grew louder, coming from the back door now, like something was trying to get in. "You hear that?" I asked, my voice shaking. He didn't answer, just tilted his head, like he was listening to something else. The road narrowed, the trees pressing closer, their branches scraping the car like claws. The GPS was useless, stuck on a blank screen, and my phone showed no signal. Panic clawed at me, but I kept going, telling myself the house was close. Then Paul spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't have taken this ride." My heart stopped. "What?" I said, turning to look at him. His face was closer now, inches from the back of my head, his eyes glinting like polished glass. "You're not supposed to be here," he said. "Not yet." The house appeared through the rain. A sagging, two-story structure with broken windows and a porch that looked ready to collapse. No lights, no cars, just an empty shell swallowed by the mist. I stopped the car, my hands trembling. "We're here," I said, trying to sound calm. Paul didn't move. I turned to face him, and my breath caught. His cap was off now, his face fully visible, pale, almost gray, with deep lines etched around his mouth, like he'd aged decades in minutes. "Wait here," he said, his voice a low hiss. He opened the door and stepped out, the rain soaking him instantly. He didn't walk to the house, but veered into the woods, disappearing into the shadows that I sat there, the engine idling, the tapping sound returning, louder now, coming from the roof. The ride was still active in the app, but the destination was gone, replaced by a spinning icon. Every instinct screamed to leave, but my body wouldn't move, like something was holding me in. The rain blurred the windshield, and the tapping became a rhythmic pounding, like fists hammering above me. I checked the mirror, half expecting to see Paul, but the back seat was empty. Then I saw it. A shadow moving outside, circling the car. Too tall, too thin, its shape wrong in the dim light that I snapped out of it, throwing the car into reverse. The tires spun, mud flying, as I backed down the road. The shadow followed, keeping pace, its outline flickering in the rain. I floored it, the car lurching onto the main road, the pounding fading but not stopping. I drove to a truck stop, my heart racing, and parked under a floodlight. The app showed no record of the ride. No Paul, no address, nothing. I called Uber support, my voice barely steady, but they said there was no data, blaming a system error. I checked the back seat, expecting it to be empty, but there was a faint smell, like wet earth and something metallic. Tucked into the seat crevice was a small, rusted key, engraved with a symbol I didn't recognize, a circle with a jagged line through it. The next day, I drove back to the house in daylight, needing to know if it was real. The place was abandoned, the windows boarded, the yard overgrown. A neighbor, an old man cutting wood, said no one had lived there in years, not since a man named Paul died in a car accident nearby, back in the 90s. He'd been an Uber driver. The man said, before Uber even existed, which didn't make sense. I didn't show him the key. I threw it into a river, but the smell lingers in my car, and sometimes, at night, I hear that tapping, faint but persistent, like he's still there. I quit Uber that week. I don't drive after dark anymore, and I avoid that road at all costs. But when the rain falls, I feel him, Paul, or whatever he was, watching from the back seat, waiting for me to take him back to that house.